We are off to meet the wizard. Finally, after all this build-up, we get to meet the man himself. Kind of. When the characters first meet Oz, he's a big, fake head. This has taken many forms over the years, from big floating holograms to giant mechanical versions. In the world of dead gods, I have giant heads, because I have giants. So of course, if I have giants at my disposal in this setting, and Oz is a giant head who specializes in messing with biology, so I thought, why make a big fake head when he could just use a Nephilim head? I've been picturing the actual Wizard of Oz being a watcher, one of the fallen angels. The giants are their offspring, so I thought it would be great if he used the severed head of one of his own offspring as a mouthpiece. Just to keep track of all of the geometry, I built a quick 3D model of the armature that the head is kept in, and then decided to just use that for the final illustration. The head has been carefully removed and then connected to tubes and pipes for hydration, fluids, oxygen flow, all of the things that are necessary. Right off the bat, you can see a large crystal stuck into its forehead. In a previous video, I talked about oracles using crystals pushed deep into the brain that just touch the pineal gland. Think of it like a mystical antenna. The head itself is technically kept alive, but it's being used more as a puppet. Brain activity is probably negligible. It's being fed the bare necessities to keep it alive. So while Nephilim are already pale, this guy is effectively turning blue. For the hydration tubes, I used a similar technique that I used in the Tin Man video, just adding a drop shadow under some white lines. This allows me to draw the tubing very quickly and evenly. I will say now, this concept is inspired by a book by C.S. Lewis. It's part of his space trilogy. I'm specifically inspired by the third book in that series, called That Hideous Strength. People who have read it will recognize the reference, but for the sake of spoilers, I won't go into too much more detail. I highly recommend it. Flowing through the tubes is the same mysterious liquid that we've seen elsewhere. It's the same liquid that's been keeping the Tin Man alive, as well as the Wicked Witch of the West. Now, I got the head to about the point where I was happy with it, but unlike the previous characters, this one really needed more of a setting. So I mocked up a very simple chamber for him. I expanded on the armature, really just to underline how dehumanizing of a position this head is in. It is purely functional. I didn't want to go as far as designing a whole room. This really more is just about atmosphere and the presentation of the wizard's head in context. So I added an extension of the tubes coming down from the machinery above. And like I said, this really is more about atmosphere and a general sense of context. So for the sake of making him seem imposing and intimidating, he just floats in darkness with mysterious green steam. To make it more of a scene, here's a moment where Dorothy has come to confront him, holding up the gauntlet that belonged to the Wicked Witch of the East. Which, this time, I remembered to draw the sixth finger, being that the Wicked Witch of the East, in this setting, was a lesser Nephilim. Saying an image is all about atmosphere is one thing, but balancing all the elements is another. So I spent quite a bit of time moving pieces around, changing up opacities, shifting colors, really just trying to find something that sold the mad scientist revelation moment of this image. The last bit of detail I added is another reference to That Hideous Strength. This head is not able to do much, and so whatever fluids it has in its mouth slowly leak out. Adding the drool just completes the idea that this thing does not have thoughts of its own. It is purely a mouthpiece. Finally, as much as I wanted this to be more of an establishing shot, for the sake of composition, I had to sacrifice some of it. I decided to close in on the scene itself. I think it just works better for the overall purpose of this image, where we really just want to see that head. Now we've seen the head, but of course we know that there's a man behind the curtain. Except in this case, the curtain is the curtain of reality. The real wizard doesn't live in this plane of existence. He is a watcher, one of the fallen angels, originally assigned as an overseer in this world. He has become obsessed. Originally fascinated by biological creation, his fascination turned to obsession, which turned to a desire for control, and wanted to be able to extend the lifespan of his own creations. So he started experimenting, crossing lines that ought not be crossed, quilting together different pieces, mixing and matching genetics, removing what could be removed and replacing it with his own engineering. As a fallen angel, his biology is different, far more resilient. There were many things he learned by testing them on himself, things that most living creatures couldn't endure. I thought of him seeking to increase his own knowledge, figuratively and literally. He's done things to his own brain that have left his head swollen and deformed. As a fallen watcher who has developed an extensive mastery over biology, his ego has gotten the better of him. In the angelic pantheon, one of the most impressive symbols of power, the throne guardians of heaven with their 6 wings. As a master of the secrets of biology, he decided to graft that symbol onto himself, giving himself wings. However, this was hubris, and the symbolic nature of these wings couldn't be escaped. They weren't his, and so no matter how many times they were grafted on, they always failed. But he's stubborn, and he'll wear and attempt to preserve each pair as long as he can. He's made enough modifications and adjustments to his own face that even he doesn't like to look upon it anymore, so he wears a mask. Masks are one of the most potent opportunities for symbolism. In this case, because he's waging a war against mortality itself, half of his face looks like an Art Deco sculpture of his former self. The other half is a skull with some musculature still on it. It's a reflection of his anatomical expertise, but also demonstrates that he wants control over life and death. Characters like this benefit from mystery. I decided to cover most of his body in robes that are meant to be part medical, scientific robes, and part priestly garments. In one of his elongated hands, he holds a flint knife. One of his primary tools, I imagine that this would be one that's been with him for nearly 1,000 years. A primitive tool that still does the job and that's become a cozy favorite. His limbs, much like the witches he employs, have been ruined through the dark arts that he wields. They're regularly patched, repatched, and continuously infused with preservatives. As with the head, I thought he would benefit from being shown in context. Rather than being behind a curtain, he's behind the veil of the dry places. The dry places are a mysterious, more spiritual layer or dimension to our world. I picture them as being critical infrastructure. Just like in our world, there are places like refineries, shipping yards, highway overpasses, places that are necessary, but not friendly to casual human traffic. They're kept apart because they're dangerous. The dry places are necessary to keep creation running, but they are not for humans to tread. There are different rules there, different dangers. I imagine the wizard is having a private library and laboratory set up in the dry places. There he keeps all of his secret knowledge hidden away while operating in the real world, mostly through his offspring's head. So here, over the centuries, he's carved more and more and more of the knowledge that he's acquired onto the walls. In this way, he moves through his surreal maze, adding more and more to his own knowledge. It was quite fun to invent esoteric, medical, anatomical, and magical designs on the walls. I wanted the atmosphere in here to be very unsettling, just dim, dark, seemingly abandoned. In a previous video, I talked about the dry places as being the backrooms of the antediluvian world. For as much pomp and spectacle as the wizard puts on in the real world, in his own laboratories and libraries, he's a rather pathetic creature, scurrying down quiet hallways, isolated with his obsession. So there we have it, the antediluvian cast of The Wizard of Oz. This was a very fun experiment, trying to apply the setting that I've already established to this story, and finding the overlaps revealed a lot of really cool stuff. A few people have commented, and I agree, that it would be a shame if I didn't use these in some form or another in the story itself. And I think there's actually a lot of opportunities for that going forward. So this was not just a fun side experiment. I think this has yielded some pretty great fruit. My plan is actually to pause the character redesigns for a little while as I focus on a new task. The new side project is to create a series of illustrations that explore the wider world of dead gods at a high level. Staying focused in on the story, doing the comic panel by panel, is essential, but I also don't want to lose sight of the whole. There are a lot of places to go, a lot of events to cover, a lot of characters to meet, and while I can't get to them all right now, it's helpful to move ahead a little bit, just to take a peek. So last week I created these 3 images, and this week I've got 3 more, starting with the alley scene. I want there to be a lot of beauty in this world. There should be some sense of tragedy that so much beauty was lost in the cataclysm. However, the ugly side is going to have to be just as prominent. One of the countless ways that the Watchers waged war against God's creation was giving them a whole host of secret knowledge, including the mixing of herbs and roots that could alter the mind. It did what was promised. It gave pleasure, it offered insights, it opened the mind. But people found out too late the gates of the mind had been shut for a reason. They opened onto dangerous country, filled with predators, and the pleasures they offered were fleeting and left nothing in their wake but a hunger for more. The shipwright and Bastion walk through an alleyway. This corner of it has become a hideaway for people who have become consumed with one of the Watcher's substances. I will always look for opportunities to add more visual storytelling. On the back wall is a bas-relief showing a large multi-eyed serpent. It has a human figure wrapped up in its coils, and it's releasing something from its mouth. Energy, a cloud, maybe even secret knowledge itself, just before devouring him. I could have gone into some pretty gruesome detail with these characters in the foreground, showing just how far gone they are, but I decided to keep them in silhouette. I think their silhouettes convey a sad enough story, while showing some of the danger and depravity of this world. I don't want to wallow in it. I don't want to get gruesome or overly medical about it. And so in this case, they stay in silhouette. This is a good reminder of how powerful silhouette can be. With just silhouettes, you can tell a very tragic story. I worked on balancing the lighting out so that the eye was drawn to the shipwright, but also showing that the glow from this alley was futilely attempting to penetrate this dark corner. This next image was another exercise in showing the darkness of this world in a PG-13 way. The main characters are walking through a desolate wilderness where they've come across an orchard of bells. These bronze bells are shaped to look like human silhouettes. From a practical standpoint, they act as a warning system when large predators are approaching. Dangerous creatures are at a scale where they'll brush against them, and with enough of them hung up in a perimeter, people can have an early warning system. However, I'm imagining that these are not empty. Similar to a gibbet, I imagine each one contains someone who was executed. Without the bells, this scene might get my video removed from this platform. And again, I don't want to wallow in the gruesome. I think it's more effective to imply it. In this case, implying it quite heavily. Part of the job of these illustrations is to help raise the stakes, to demonstrate just how dark things can be in different parts of this world. For the atmosphere, I tried to finish this off as grimly as possible. Very foggy, dense place where the air looks sick. This is effectively a hanging graveyard. Finally, the cage. This was an opportunity to revisit an old image that I sketched up during the glass video. The idea is that they can pour glass into large molds and create immense bricks of it. This extra strong glass becomes particularly useful when you want to observe large and insanely dangerous creatures. In this case, someone has become obsessed with dragons. He's captured one and spends almost every waking moment observing it. While he is confident in the glass wall, many of his servants are not, and simply being in the watchful presence of these creatures is unnerving to the sane. Here, one of his servants does everything she can not to look. As a side note, on her plate, I've drawn bowls and cups. I wanted to do something a little different, and I thought, what would someone slowly going mad want to eat? So I created a sphere, a cube, and a cone made of meat. Like his madness has led him to only want to eat food in geometrical shapes. Why? Just because it's fun to do that kind of thing. The obsessed dragon owner has allowed his hair to go wild, and he wears nothing but a robe of dragon skin. It may be a futile attempt to relate to the creature, or reflect just his deep love and admiration for them. One way or another, we know this won't end well for him. Now for the glass bricks themselves, this was a frustrating experience. Rendering glass is hard, and right out of the gate, I'm not interested in rendering it realistically. To do that requires a level of complexity that I'm just not interested in, especially for the medium of comics. I built a 3D mock-up to get the perspective, and that was very helpful. I created the line work for it, and that was easy enough. The rendering was where it gets difficult. But before then, I inked up the dragon, this time around a Carnotaurus. I had a lot of fun drawing the Carnotaurus in the Hunting Ground episode, so I thought it would be nice to throw in another one. Now, I usually skip over this part, but I figured this time around I would show the entire process. You'll notice things have exploded into every color possible. I use Photoshop for my illustrating, and there is a color flatting program, or plugin, called Bytheway-May. And with Bytheway-May, as long as all of your loops are closed, it will fill up every closed loop with a different color. And then it eliminates all of the black lines between them, which means you can go through and very quickly choose what colors you actually want, and simply click through with all of the colors you want with the fill bucket. The advantage here is that it means you're not drawing everything again in color. I have found it has saved me a lot of time, so if you're using Photoshop, I recommend it. If there's an alternative in other programs, I don't know about it, but if you do, maybe comment. One of the nice benefits of working like this is that if I keep a layer with all of the colors, after I've got the colors the way I want them, I can bring this layer back on top with a very low opacity overlay, and it adds just a hint of color variation to every little section, which I think creates more life. With all of the flat colors in place, I can add the shadow layers and adjust some of the overall values to make sure everything is reading the way I'd like it to. Everything else is taken care of. I have to deal with the glass. I was constantly bouncing around, trying to figure out a good ordering of different layers, colors, attributes, trying to decide what's too bright, what's not bright enough. Do I want things to be overlaid, screened, adjust the color? Is just opacity the question? How much distortion do I actually want in the glass? Ultimately, I decided to abandon the idea of distortion altogether. That would do wonders to enhance the feeling of glass, but I would still be working on this image if I tried to do that. I asked myself, what's the point of this image? And really, it's just to show this dragon intensely staring at someone who thinks they're in control. I found it really helped when I embraced green glass. Adding that color gave the glass a character of its own, and made it more obvious that the dragon was on the other side of it. With the glass being green, the light coming through it would be green as well. So I adjusted all the stone and the characters, and that made everything feel more grounded. With a bit of reflection on the floor and some dragon breath fog added to the exterior of the glass. Despite how hard, or maybe because of how hard I wrestled with it, this has become one of my favorite images from the Dead God series so far. So that does it for this week. We wrapped up The Wizard of Oz, and I've got 3 more illustrations for my series. Next week, I'll add some more images to it, and I'm going to try to lay the groundwork for the next episode. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching, everyone.